All right, good afternoon. My name is Ben Tran. I'm part of Microsoft Azure Customer Advisory teams, and we do a lot of different certifications and creations of the intellectual properties and advising customers on how to onboard the SAP workload onto Azure. And obviously we run the HANA, SAP HANAs on a lot of SUSE operating systems. So today we will look at some of the marketplace for us, and the jointly between SUSE and Microsoft, and as well some of the technical pieces that go behind supporting the SAP workload on Azure. And as you can tell here, we've been picking up a lot of momentums, customers' adaptations onto running the SAP workload on Azure. And then we also will, we obviously will have customers from different industries. I personally have worked with customers at retail and as well as some manufacturing customers throughout the world. And 70% of customers moving to Azure from NEDB, the so-called NEDBs. I think many of you are familiar with that notations. SAP called NEDB being things like SQL Server, DB2, Oracle, etc. Moving on to HANA on the cloud as well. And then we will talk about some of the migration scenarios that customers usually come across. I need to. Then from a compute engine standpoint, we have a slew of spectrums of virtual machines of different sizes that have been certified to run the NetWeaver workload, as well as the different supported RDBMS or SAP HANA on Azure. And you can, from a operating system standpoint, if you look at SUSE, there are various flavors. This is basically the Azure Marketplace. If you are deploying a virtual machine to run SAP HANA, for example, you have a choice of the two different categories of SUSE operating system. One that this category includes the supports and the licensing. And there's another, bring your own license, bring your own subscriptions. In other words, you need to have already prearranged a licensing agreement with SUSE. Then you select this. Obviously, the difference is the price, right? The pricing for this one would be higher, and you would pay for the amount of usage that you do incur. And the reason we say be careful, because once you deploy it, you cannot really upgrade or downgrade or change. You need to redeploy the virtual machine to change the licensing types. And customers who goes from, let's say, on-premises, like today, if you or you know of a friend's companies, they run their SAP systems on premises, and these are what we commonly observe the migration path that customer would do. Some customers go take a two-step approach. First, they migrate as is, or the so-called lift and shift. They run everything as they did on premises, on the cloud, on Azure. We support that model, that fashions of migrations. And afterward, like a year or two later, when they get either used to the cloud or S4 HANA has all of the feature sets that they require as they are accustomed to on the classical classic ERP solutions, then they could migrate onto S4. So that is the one path, and the other path is some customer would say, hey, I have some new feature sets that S4 offers, I like to go straight to S4, and typically you see these are like greenfield implementations. Customer implement a new sets of features on the cloud with S4, then they go straight from this to there. Okay, so those are the primary two categories, and I won't go into details of every single path, but those are the two. And from computer engine standpoint, you can see that we have a whole line of different types of virtual machines for different purposes. Some are more lean to or high performance computing. Others are more general purpose computings. So these that say certified for NetWeaver or certified for HANA, they are, we tested them with the SAP certification exam or test suites that we went through all of the cycles of testing and certified them with SAP. So these you can use for your production SAP workload. For others, you can use it for SAP as well, but for maybe non-production systems. If you expect support from SAP, like on your production system, it's best to deploy on the certified virtual machines. And lots of different varieties of instances. Basically, I went through that, but from very small system, from 2 CPU, 14 gigs, up to like 128. This is what currently is GA. This is our current largest MSeries machine that you can run up to 2 terabytes of a HANA database on such a system. And this week we just announced a newer, sometimes referred to as MV2, newer, larger virtual machines, 6 terabyte, rounding up. 6 terabyte, and that will be GA in a few days, in about 1 week. And then we also announced that 12 terabyte machines, which will be GA in 3 months, something like that. So that we have a big spectrum of machines. So when you look at a 12 terabyte virtual machines, it can fit really 90%, 95% of the world's HANA sizes, right? There are obviously a few big customers that want it bigger. And obviously, we will grow bigger as well from a technology standpoint. Now, these machines, you can deploy single instance and we do give the single instance installations with the premium managed storage, an SLA, 99.9%. And if you need higher SLA, there are various ways that you can structure your solution architecture in such a way that you get even better availabilities, okay, and including across zones for mini disasters. Availability zones are not really geared toward the disaster recovery. They are more of a high availability solution, so you can deploy machines across zones. Then your availabilities of that service that you deploy could get up to 99.95. Okay, and from a disaster recovery standpoint, there are various service offerings that we have. For example, ASR, Azure Site Recoveries, that you can structure it in such a way that you can provide disaster protections for your primary regions where you deploy your primary assets. Okay, so there are lots of different ways, and when you come to the point of designing a solutions, we have all kinds of different folks who can help you and your partners to ensure that your design is according to all of the recommended practices. And we have published documentations out on Azure.com. You can find reference architectures that we show specifically what you can do and what are some of the options that you could choose then to reach your SLA. Basically, that's the goal. Okay. Then, in terms of creating a high availability infrastructure to run your SAP workload, earlier I was saying that a few different ways that you could do, right? Availability sets is one way, and with the coupled with the SUSE HAE, high availability extension, which provides you the pacemakers software, as well as some of the custom agents, for HANA failover, as well as for the NetWeaver ASCS, the ABAP central services, to protect that single point of failures in the NetWeaver architecture. So you could do all of that. And we also have the NetApp file services because on Azure we don't do cluster share volumes. You do not do share this on cloud basically. And there are different ways to create your cluster share volume. Either you use a replicated independent sets of disks that replicate the contents and present logically the volumes to the cluster software as a CSV. Then the other way is to use a shared file shares. So in this case, the Azure NetApp Files is a solution that we provide primarily used within the Linux operating system platform. Then you can create failover clusters with the ANF file shares. Okay. And we have big plan for ANFs in the future, but right now we only have that SAP mount or ASCS cluster file share functions validated and certified for production use. We will work on using that for scale out configurations of, for example, BW for HANA and maybe soon S4 HANA scale out, leveraging that kind of file shares. And this is a high-level pictures of the scalabilities that we have. From very small machines, little bit tiny little machines down here in the corner in terms of RAM as well as from CPU scales, all the way up to from this range on. You go beyond the current hypervisor supports. Like I said earlier, we did announce bigger machines already, down to 6 terabytes and then 12 terabytes virtual machines. But currently, you have the GA. We have had this generally in production for probably a year now. That up to 24 terabyte in single instance hardware as a service, kind of, okay, but under the umbrellas of Azure. So that's the range of scalability up to 960 CPU. And some of the strategies that we abide by, in other words, you see from a connectivity standpoint, we are putting out a lot of services on Azure, past style of services like Power BIs and a lot of analytics capabilities, and by providing connectors directly onto ERP, onto BWs, onto HANA, so that you can perform analytics reporting functionalities directly from Azure platform as a service kind of offerings. And then we keep scaling the virtual machines into larger and larger size so that you can run bigger and bigger HANA workload onto it. And also for customers who have gargantuan size of HANA databases, we do offer the physical machines that they can scale into in multiple, in different ways, scale up and down as well as scale out and in. So we offer all of that, and the name of that offerings is HANA Large Instances. And this is a snapshot of the hardware directory on SAP.com. You can find that, and when you choose IS, for Microsoft, you see all of our offerings in both virtual machines, and all of these S's, they are all the HANA Large Instances. The M's currently are, and the G and these and the smaller virtual machines. And nowadays we typically don't use the GS machines anymore because that's our first generation large VMs. And now we have much larger virtual machines, and our investments are into hardware that runs the M series right now, M and MV2. And I spoke about my team doing a lot of intellectual properties. These are probably not all done by my team, but many of them, when you click on them, you will find, like Sachin's names and my names and a lot of them from Jürgen Thomas and many from Cameron's. We do create recommended practices for customers to reference. We never dictate what customers should do, but we, out of our testing, our certification runs, what we experience the best to provide best performance, highest availabilities, and IOPS on your storage and minimal network latency. We put those kind of practices onto these kind of documents. Okay, so if you want to remember something that is relatively easy to find, it's AKA, also known as .ms for Microsoft / architecture. Then under there on the left-hand pane, you look for SAP. Under there, we publish some SAP reference architectures. If you are relatively new to running SAP on Azure, that would give you a really good head start. You look through how we create solutions to run SAP workload on Azure. Then that tells you all of the various layers and components from running primary, how do you create DRs, how do you do backup, and references many links to the various details for monitoring as well. So that is the end of the presentations. Anybody has any questions?
The M-class scaling, it seems like it's only on the East Coast and the West Coast. Are you coming to the Midwest at any point?
Very good questions. So the M virtual machines, do we only have it on the East Coast and the West Coast? The answer is that obviously the intentions is to have all these services, all of them everywhere, right? However, it depends on the demands, right? And if you can, you imagine in your data center nowadays, if you have to buy these gigantic machines, it costs quite a bit of money, right? And we need to put money where the demand is. So then, yes, we. Right now, the M series actually have been made available in many different places on the world, but like central U.S., maybe it's not there yet, right? Yeah. So.
I think it's in the roadmap. I think we are right now live with the 12 zones already.
Yeah. So Sachin said it's the central U.S. is on the roadmap, but obviously it will get rolled out as the demand increases. So basically, we do that based on demand. Okay. We have them East and West U.S. We have them in Europe and Japan and Australia, and probably a few that I missed.
All right, how's it going? Are you about done?
Yes.
All right, let's give a big hand for Ben. Thank you so much for coming to our booth.
All right.
And doing this presentation. We really appreciate it. If you have, can you stay for a couple minutes? If anybody else has a question, they want to talk to you one-on-one.
I love to.
Be here for a minute. All right, so you can do that.